When the design is decided, before we go into the building phase, we take the plans and make working drawings. These are used to both show how something is assembled and why it is assembled that way, and then create a cut list to go along with it. This would be done to scale. And that way, if we are building a specialized flat, we have accurate drawings of it. For example, if it is larger than a standard flat, if it has a door, or perhaps a window in it. That way, we can use it to get accurate measurements from the model. The cut list would include everything that needs to be cut down for the show: the pine, luan, plywood, and many other pieces. We then take this cut list and create a budget for the pieces. We make a spreadsheet that includes a breakdown of everything we are going to build and the materials needed to do so. Once that is complete, we know how many pieces of each material, the cost of each piece, that we then take to the directors to give an approximate cost for the set. We always tend to estimate a little higher in case some things get added on later.
Woo-wee! Now it's time to talk about Hog Trough. We want to leg our platforms. We got two choices. We either use 4x4s, which are extremely heavy, or we build what we call Hog Trough. It's 2 pieces of pine ripped down to 2.5 inches. Then we run glue along one of the pieces and lay the other piece perpendicular to it and staple them together lengthwise. Once dried, we can achieve the same strength as a 4x4, but with 1/3 the weight. That means 4x4s are only used when it comes to a look that the designer wants. To go into more depth, the strength exists because the grain goes both directions on the Hog Trough, and sometimes we can take 2 bold pieces of pine and make them into Hog Trough, each board making the whole unit come out straight. Thus, it allows us not to have to throw out the material. Why I use 2.5 inches and not 3 inches or more? Because logically, bigger is stronger. Since the 2.5 is strong enough, we want to ensure we maximize material use. Inside our shop, we have a chart to show how many pieces of material we can get out of a piece of lumber. We can get 4 pieces of pine when ripped to 2.5, but anything wider than that, and we can only get 3 pieces or less. Woo doggy! When we build a staircase, a 4x8 sheet of 3/4 inch plywood is enough to build a 3-step unit. We will be using the sides of the plywood as the bottom of the stair unit, and we will start with the bottom step. As you can see, our first step in the process is measuring 7 inches and 12 inches, putting marks 2 times to ensure our line is straight. 7 inches because once the plywood is placed on top, we will have an 8-inch rise and a 12-inch tread. Once we have the 2 marks made, we use a framing square to draw lines between our marks. Then we continue the process for the next 2 steps, increasing the step rise of 8 inches and the step tread of 12 inches. Just with many other things we do, there is plenty of other materials we can use to make a staircase. We sometimes use 2x12 lumber or steel, but these are specific circumstances. We have not built a new staircase like that for a few years, as they last a long time and are only used for specific design purposes. Oh, it looks like we are moving on with our staircase. Once completed, these 2 pieces will become stringers to our staircase. They are the side pieces that support the staircase. The line we created will become the back of the stair unit. We will cut all the way across so we have 2 pieces of plywood now. We will take the piece we just cut off and then cut off the steps themselves. A jigsaw or skill saw can be used. In this video, we used both, cutting only up to where the lines intersect with the skill saw. This is because the blade of the skill saw cuts more above than it does below. So to avoid cutting too much, we use the jigsaw to cut what's left. Next, we use the panel saw to cut 3 12-inch strips and make them 36 inches long. These are going to be the tread, or the step itself. Making the rake, or angle at the bottom, measuring 16 inches front to back and 8 inches down from the top step. Mark the angle and cut it off. This makes the staircase lighter and more transportable and storable when we aren't using them for show. Now we glue and staple the threads in place. We use 1.5" staples for this. After we install a couple pieces across the bottom, so we have a way of attaching it to the floor. And a leg attached underneath each of the back corners. And finally, the last finishing touches, add supports under the tread Bam! Stairs ready to go.
When we build our platforms, we first set the table saw to 5¼ inches and rip down our 1x12 pine to that size. Once the first piece is ripped, we then flip over the piece and run the non-cut edge against the table saw fence. Then we cut the end of the pine board. That way it gives us a nice square edge. When they come from the factory, this is not a guarantee they are square. Then measure and cut our pieces to length. Our standard platforms are 4x8, as that is the size that plywood comes in. But as with everything else, we can make them many other sizes. We will then lay out the boards we cut into positioning that they will be for assembly. Put the glue on the end and use 1.5" staples for assembly. And soon each piece will have a staple in it. Now you can see us marking out the 2-foot centers. Notice how when we place them, we use a square to ensure the piece is put in accurately. Now that our frame is assembled, we will then be putting our plywood on top. This piece is very important to making sure our platform is square. When plywood is manufactured, it is a rectangle with all corners square. This allows us to use the plywood to make our frame squared. We start with one of the corners, then working around the shorter edge, then we work along the longer edge. We use this same technique when building our walls, for our shows as well. The frame is malleable and is able to shift to make sure the plywood lines up on all the edges. Now, while we wait for Ms. Neb to install the rest of the screws into the frame, let's discuss other types of materials we use to build platforms. The type of material we use determines the strength, weight, and design choice. The other two main materials we use of building a platforms are steel and 2x6 lumber. Sometimes a show calls for a more hefty look or an authentic look. For that, we would use 2x6 lumber. Notable shows they were used in are Peter and the Starcatcher, Crucible, and Passion Play. Steel is the strongest of materials we use. When it comes to large metal platforms, we would build a double truss system and can have legs every 8 to 12 feet, and it still holds strong. These are extremely heavy though, and are not very maneuverable. We do not use them very often for these reasons. Zombie Prom, Radium Girls, and Tommy are shows we did use these metal platforms.
Здравствуйте. My name is Boris Diplike, and I am a theatrical wall. You may be wondering how exactly I got here. To answer that, we are going to need to go back to the beginning. Too far. That is too far. Here we are as I get pulled from the pile of lumber. The first thing they have to do is cut me down into smaller pieces. They run me across the table saw and rip me down to 2.5 of your American inches, the perfect width. The next thing they do is take me to the radial arm saw. They need to cut me down into a more manageable length. It is not looking bad if I do say so myself. Now we move to fabrication table, and it is time to put me together. Each of the different parts of the flat have different names. Stiles are the long upright pieces or sides of the flat. Rails are the top and bottom pieces. Running horizontal, think of it as handrails. They usually are the shorter pieces and they cap over the stiles. Toggles are the center pieces between these stiles. They give the flat rigidity and prevent bowing of the piece. On our 4x10 flat, we use 3 of these, one at 32 inches, another at 64, and one at the 8-foot seam mark. Then, they add a piece of Luan, a distant cousin from the Philippines. Well, in old days, Luan came from the Philippines. These days, Home Depot. After squaring up the Luan, they staple it down. The original reason for using Luan is it is a lot lighter than other woods. In addition, at the time, it was much cheaper, making it more cost efficient. Once I am fully constructed, I use the router to smooth my sharp edges and take off any excess wood that might be left. Then, they apply speckle. This fills in any small holes or imperfections, making a smooth painting surface. Only when the speckle is completely dry. In the case of this speckle, when it is turned from pink to white, can it be sanded and totally made smooth. Now that this phase is complete, it is time for me to be transported to the theater. They load me into a truck, I get to breathe nice fresh air. You may be asking yourself, Boris, why you? Why do you care about the theater? Let me tell you, the motherland has made great contributions to theater. Stanislavski, Tchaikovsky, Mayanovsky. The last, he is my brother, a great Siberian pie. Every year he is the location of the famous Siberian Bear Feast. You can see Neb and Mr. M unloading me and bringing me into the theater. This 10-foot flat has some serious height. They then stand me up and drill me strategically to the floor, where I can then be painted and used as a part of the set. I am Boris the Blank, and this has been wall construction.
Here is our router. It is a tool that has a spinning blade attached to a motor. Our most important bit we use is the flush trim bit. It is specifically designed to have a roller wheel that runs parallel to the blade. As you can see, it cut the Luan out of the way to the same level as the plywood. Another type of bit we use a lot is the roundover bit. It can vary in sizes of a 1/16 of an inch up to 1 inch or more. This is used to accomplish a few different looks. We use them to make handrails, taking the sharp edge and making it so we can safely run our hands along it. The smaller ones achieve the same goal as the larger ones, but it depends on the design choice, so know the look you are going for. The Roman Oji is another type of bit. It carves our wood in a fancy pattern. We often use this for molding as it gives a much more elegant look. There are many other types of bits we use, but these 3 are what we use most. When it comes to molding, we have 2 choices. Either we purchase what we want, or we make it ourselves. This is decided by knowing the complexity of each piece. The simpler pieces we oftentimes purchase, as they are cheap enough. As we get larger and more complex, sometimes several pieces are put together to create the look we are going for, and we will make those types of moldings by hand. One of the most complicated pieces we made for a show was the molding in Harvey. It had several different pieces that made it up.
So we're gonna talk a thing or two about welding. And as I know a thing or two about protection, we figured that I would maybe fill you mooks in. Now, Austin, you better stop right there. You need to have protection first. There you go. Sometimes a jacket can protect you from errant sparks. So go ahead and put that on. Any day now, Twinkle Toes. Give it a good button. There we go. Alright, so moving on to welding. Hold on. Yes, no, we're not done yet. No, yeah, put that down. We need to put on a protective helmet. This protects your eyeballs. Also gloves. It is important to use gloves when doing any sort of work, if you know what I mean. So once he's got his gloves on, then we'll almost be ready to weld. When welding, you must remember to attach your ground to the metal, or you will not complete the electrical circuit and be able to weld. If you do not wear your PPE, you can get burned, as we are melting wire between 2 pieces of metal. It's important to always be aware of your surroundings and sweep up any debris that could catch fire. But once you begin welding, slow and steady is the answer. Now, doesn't that look great?